The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the quiet town of Evermere Bay. Nestled between rolling hills and sprawling estates, it was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where the morning papers still mattered, and strangers stood out. At the heart of this town was Ibrahim Zafar, a 75-year-old billionaire whose wealth had shaped Evermere Bay for decades. A shipping tycoon turned real estate mogul, he was respected, feared, and envied. But most of all, he was a mystery. Then came the storm. It wasn't the kind that ripped through the streets, knocking down trees. It was the kind that whispered through the cracks of a perfectly constructed life. It started the day Selene Dobrev, a striking 21-year-old woman, arrived in town. She was young, ambitious, and breathtakingly beautiful. But it wasn't her beauty that made Evermere Bay talk, it was the announcement. Selene and Ibrahim were getting married. Gossip spread like wildfire. Some called it romance, others called it a transaction. But no one could have imagined how dark this love story would turn. 3 months later, Ibrahim was found dead in his mansion, murdered, and Evermere Bay would never be the same again. The night sky over Evermere Bay was clouded in a thick mist, as if the town itself was holding its breath. A faint drizzle coated the streets, making the cobblestone roads glisten under the dim streetlights. Inside the grand Zafar estate, a storm of a different kind was brewing. Ibrahim Zafar sat in his study, swirling a glass of aged whiskey. The once mighty billionaire had started to look frail, his face marked with lines of worry. Across from him stood his young wife, Selene Dobrev, her delicate fingers tapping impatiently against the mahogany desk. Their marriage had been the town's biggest scandal. But behind the whispers and speculation, there was a deeper, more dangerous story unfolding. Ibrahim's wealth wasn't as secure as everyone believed. His business empire had cracked silent debts, enemies in high places, and a growing fear that his young wife knew more than she let on. Selene, on the other hand, was not the naive girl Evermere Bay assumed. She had secrets of her own. Then there was Dmitry Kosta, Ibrahim's longtime lawyer and confidant. He had warned Ibrahim about Selene. "She's not who she says she is," he had muttered more than once. But love or desperation had made Ibrahim blind. The night before the murder, tensions boiled over. A heated argument erupted behind the locked doors of Ibrahim's study. The staff heard raised voices. A glass shattered. Selene stormed out, her face pale, her fists clenched. The next morning, Ibrahim Zafar was found dead in his bedroom. A single gunshot wound to the chest, no signs of forced entry. The mansion, once a symbol of power, was now a crime scene. And for the first time, the town of Evermere Bay realized this was never just a love story. It was a game of power, deception, and death. A heavy silence hung over Zafar estate. The early morning light seeped through the grand windows, casting long shadows over the lavish bedroom where Ibrahim Zafar lay lifeless. The billionaire's body was sprawled across the silk-covered bed, his nightrobe stained crimson. A single gunshot wound to the chest clean, precise. The smell of gunpowder still lingered in the air. A glass of half-finished whiskey sat on the nightstand, undisturbed. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, nothing stolen, yet something felt wrong. Detective Rafiq Mirza surveyed the room with a trained eye. The silence was deceptive. The details whispered secrets the killer had hoped to bury. On the floor near the bed lay a pearl earring, Selene's earring. A window slightly ajar despite the cold. Had someone entered, or had they left? The security cameras in the estate had been disabled, meticulously wiped clean between 3:00 and 3:15 a.m. Whoever had done this knew what they were doing. By the time the police arrived, the estate was already alive with murmurs. Dmitry Kosta stood by the doorway, his face unreadable. The staff huddled in the hallway, whispering. And then there was Selene Dobrev, standing in her silk robe, her expression frozen between shock and something else. Something darker. Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke, her voice trembling. I found him like this. He was fine when I went to bed. But Detective Mirza wasn't convinced. Outside the estate, the town of Evermere Bay was waking up to the news. A billionaire was dead. His young wife was the first to find him. And now, the quiet town was about to unravel. Because this wasn't just a murder, it was a game. And someone was playing to win. The crime scene was sealed, the estate crawling with forensic teams and officers. The town of Evermere Bay, once a place of quiet routine, was now a spectacle of flashing lights and whispered theories. Leading the investigation was Detective Rafiq Mirza, a seasoned investigator known for his relentless pursuit of the truth. His eyes scanned the bedroom, taking in every detail, the position of the body, the undisturbed furniture, the misplaced earring. It was a scene meant to look simple, but to Mirza, simplicity was often the most elaborate deception. Selene Dobrev, the grieving widow. Her statement was shaky but controlled. I was asleep. I woke up and found him like this. Yet, something in her tone didn't sit right. Why had she not heard the gunshot? The estate was massive, but sound carried in the dead of night. Her pearl earring found near the bed raised more questions. The security system had been disabled between 3 and 3:15 a.m., an odd window of time. The coroner estimated Ibrahim's time of death between 2:45 and 3:30 a.m. right within the gap. The cameras had been shut down before the body was discovered, meaning someone knew exactly when to strike. And then came a critical piece of evidence, Ibrahim's last phone call. At 2:58 a.m. he had dialed Dmitry Costa. The call lasted 17 seconds. A secret phone call. Dmitry, his longtime lawyer and friend, had an alibi. He was home, asleep. Yet when questioned about the call, he hesitated. I didn't answer. I was asleep. But Mirza wasn't convinced. Why would Ibrahim call his lawyer in the middle of the night just minutes before his death? And then came a twist, one that changed everything. The bullet recovered from Ibrahim's chest didn't match any of the registered guns in the estate. This meant one thing. The murder weapon was missing. Someone had planned this murder with precision. Someone who knew the estate well. Someone who knew exactly how to manipulate the evidence. And for Detective Mirza, one thing was certain. This wasn't just about money or love. It was about power. The hunt for the killer had begun. The grand courtroom of Evermere Bay Superior Court was packed. Journalists, legal analysts, and curious townspeople filled the wooden benches, their whispers rising like an unrelenting tide. The case of Ibrahim Zafar's murder had become a spectacle, one of wealth, betrayal, and deception. At the center of it all sat Selene Dobrev, the accused widow, dressed in a sleek black suit, her expression unreadable. On the opposite side, the prosecution team, led by attorney Nadia Farouk, was determined to prove her guilt. The trial had been building for weeks, and now it was time for the final showdown. Nadia Farouk stood before the jury, her voice sharp and unwavering. The evidence is clear. Selene Dobrev had both motive and opportunity. She laid out the timeline. The security cameras were disabled just before the murder. The missing murder weapon which had never been recovered. The pearl earring found near the victim's body, Selene's earring. Then came the most damning piece of evidence. A bank transfer, $3 million deposited into a foreign account just days before the murder. This wasn't just a crime of passion, Farouk continued. It was a premeditated execution. The courtroom murmured. Selene remained still, but her fingers tightened around the edge of the defense table. Selene's lawyer, Victor Hale, was known for his ruthless defense strategies. He paced the courtroom, then turned toward the jury. Isn't it convenient? A grieving wife already judged guilty by the public with circumstantial evidence at best. He picked apart the prosecution's case. The security system could have been tampered with by anyone. The earring? Planted. A simple trick to frame her. The bank transfer? A red herring. Selene's wealth had always been separate from Ibrahim's business affairs. Then came the bombshell twist. Hale held up a forensic report. The gunpowder residue found on Ibrahim's hands. Ladies and gentlemen, this suggests one thing. What if this wasn't a murder but a suicide? Gasps filled the room. Just when it seemed like Selene might walk free, the prosecution called their final witness, Dmitry Costa. He stepped forward, his face pale. I lied, he admitted. I did answer Ibrahim's call that night. A hush fell over the courtroom. He told me, she knows everything. If anything happens to me, it was her. Selene's mask of composure cracked. The courtroom erupted in chaos. The judge banged the gavel. The jury members exchanged tense glances. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The foreman stood, voice steady. In the case of Selene Dobrev, we find the defendant. The room held its breath. Guilty. Selene's face drained of color. A single tear slipped down her cheek, not of sorrow but of rage. As she was led away, she turned to Dmitry, her voice a whisper only he could hear. You should have kept your mouth shut. And with that, the trial of the century came to an end, or so they thought. The town of Evermere Bay was never the same after the trial. Once a peaceful coastal haven, it had now become infamous, a place where whispers replaced greetings, and trust was a fragile thing. Shops that once thrived saw fewer visitors. Neighbors who once left their doors unlocked now installed security cameras. The mansion where Ibrahim Zafar had lived remained empty, a haunting reminder of the scandal that shook the town. Some called it the widow's curse, believing tragedy followed those who sought fortune over love. Ibrahim's children, Yasir and Hana Zafar, rarely spoke to the media. Their father's death had left a void no amount of wealth could fill. "Money didn't save him," Hana had once said in an interview, "and it won't bring him back." Their father had built an empire, yet his legacy was now overshadowed by betrayal and greed. Some sympathized with them, but others whispered that the children had their own secrets, ones that might never come to light. For Detective Elias Novak, the case haunted him. The details replayed in his mind Celine's cold stare, the hidden bank transactions, Dmitry Costa's final testimony. Had they truly uncovered the full story, or had they merely scratched the surface of a darker truth? Even Victor Hale, Celine's defense lawyer, had disappeared from the public eye. The case had been a career-defining moment, yet he never took another high-profile case again. Some said he feared retribution. Others believed he had uncovered something too dangerous to expose. The trial had become a media sensation, sparking debates on morality, justice, and the influence of power. Some saw Selene Dobrev as a manipulative gold digger who had played the system until it collapsed on her. Others believed she was framed, a woman caught in a web spun by forces far beyond her control. The case even led to new financial laws, preventing quick transfers of wealth in suspicious circumstances. But for the people of Evermere Bay, no law could erase the memory of what had happened. The crime had left a scar, a reminder that even in the most idyllic places, darkness could lurk just beneath the surface. Years later, as the headlines faded and new scandals took their place, the story of Ibrahim Zafar and Selene Dobrev remained a chilling tale of ambition, deception, and fate. Perhaps the greatest lesson was this: wealth does not guarantee safety, love does not guarantee loyalty, and justice? Justice, like the truth, is often clouded by perception. People still wondered, had the right person been punished, or was the real mastermind still out there watching, waiting? One thing was certain: in the game of power and money, only one rule remained unbreakable: trust no one,